Hello everyone, I'm Captain Logan, and today I'm going to talk about something a little bit off the beaten path. Today I'm going to tell you how I felt about a Ninja Turtles homebrew game. This is a thing I don't think I've ever talked about before, because honestly it's not something I forayed much into. Homemade video games, free to play, downloadable on your computer, homemade video games. This is Ninja Turtles Rescue Palooza, and this is, again, not a licensed Ninja Turtles game. Nobody's making any money off of this. This is a love letter to Ninja Turtles beat-em-ups from the 80s and 90s, and is throwing back to the original Ninja Turtles arcade game, but also all of the beat-em-ups on the NES, and even the original NES Ninja Turtles game, which is both a beat-em-up and a platformer, and a really hard, unfair, crazy platform, notoriously unfair. I remember AVGN's joke, oh, you just walk over it? You just walk over it. And it calls back to Turtles in Time, it calls back to Hyperstone Heist, all of that stuff, and it's also a love letter to the 87 Turtles show. This is a thing that came out over the summer. I didn't know about it, and I wish I had, because I've been playing it all this time. Eric turned me on to this, and he's actually not played it himself, but found out about it through a podcast and was like, oh, this sounds like something Cap would like, and asked me if I played it or heard about it, and I said I hadn't, and he said that it was, like I said, a throwback to those games, and the gimmick is that you go through and you rescue a bunch of characters and then you can play as them. So not only are you playing as the 4 turtles, but you can play as, I believe, a whopping 60 characters, and some of them are villains, some of them are heroes, some of them are allies, some of them are just civilian characters, and some of that gets really funny, and they're not just carbon copy skins of each other either. Everybody's got their own move set, everybody's got their own special move. Some characters are real weak in certain areas and stronger in other areas. Some characters are real lumbering, some move very quickly, and you get stats on them, and you can tell before you pick somebody if, you know, what exactly their strengths and weaknesses are, if they're more powered, or if they're more agile, or what exactly they're good at, and some of them are fun to play just to see what they do based on the crazy and sometimes obscure characters that are in this, and that sounded awesome, and I had to find out, so I downloaded it immediately. And first of all, let me talk a little bit about what this is like to play just on a computer system, because of course this is not a thing you can get on a console. Obviously, you can put in a controller, a USB controller, and map out your controller settings and play it that way, and I didn't have any problem with any of my USB controllers. I played it with a 360 controller and also 2 wired Switch controllers, had no problem with it whatsoever, and that was really nice because I thought I might have to monkey with it a little bit. Didn't have any issue with that at all. This is not an emulation game. It doesn't require an emulator, so it's its own system. You just download it, and it's a zip file, and you just export that and start it, and you're good to go. I played this with my older 2 sons, Freddie and Jason, and they had an absolute blast playing this. Like with a lot of beat-em-ups, this is a lot easier if you play with other people, and I think it would have taken me a lot longer to get through if I played it by myself. This is not a real lengthy game, which is a good thing and a bad thing, but much more of a good thing. It's a little bit longer, I would say, than your average 90s beat-em-up game. I want to say a little bit more levels, a couple, 3 more levels than you usually see in a game like that, but I think the levels are a little bit shorter than normal, even for a Ninja Turtles game, and I'm of 2 minds about that, because on the one hand, it feels like you get to a boss really quickly, and the level designs aren't real complex. There are let me also mention that there are levels that are kind of straight out of other games, but they're never like exactly the same level, because they're never as long as that, and there are other levels that are kind of original from the ground up, so they might be kind of you know, sort of like Weird Al songs. Like you have the parodies and then you have the pastiches, and there are levels that feel like a pastiche to a particular game before it's a straight up redesign or carbon copy of a level you've seen before. So I think there are more levels than you usually have with a thing like this, but because the levels are shorter, it probably evens itself out to about the same gameplay time as, say, Turtles in Time. But like we got through this in an hour and a half, maybe a couple hours. I don't think it took even that long. But there is a decent enough variety in gameplay in the levels, and more importantly, there's immediately extra replay value in this than you'd usually get with a beat-em-up like this, because there are so many different characters to choose from. So it's a lot of fun to go back and play the levels you played already, just to see how certain characters get through the level and how they play. I don't know if the difficulty settings or the difficulty levels are different depending on how many players you have, because I just did this with my two boys. So if I was playing by myself, I don't know if the levels are a little bit easier to get through because you don't have help. I've not tested that, so I'm not sure. But one thing that I really like about this game is that you unlock several characters each level you play, and it's not set up to give you different characters to make it easier to get through other levels. It's not set up so that you're supposed to get certain characters earlier in the game and other characters later in the game. You kind of have the power of what characters you unlock if you either already knew what levels you were getting because, you know, you did some research and you found out, or you just guessed based on the different kinds of levels you were looking at, the different arenas. There's kind of hints based on where you're going. There's an overworld map, which is based on the map from the first NES game and uses the same music, which is great. And so you walk around and you can pick which location you go to, and you don't have to fight foot soldiers or anything, and you don't have a health meter in that section like you did in that game, so you can't unfairly lose life before you get into a level. But anyway, each stage is labeled, so you have kind of a sense of what you might be getting yourself into. So it's sort of fun to guess what characters might show up and what characters you might be able to unlock in different places. Like, minor spoilers, but there's a swamp level, and of course, at the end of that, you fight Leatherhead, and then you can get and play as Leatherhead. There is a construction site level, and as we were playing through that, I was like, oh, this looks remarkably like the construction site from Ninja Turtles 2. I bet you fight Toka and Razor at the end of that, and indeed, those were the characters that you unlocked there. So you can kind of guess at it here and there. It's pretty clear which one is going to have April, you know, etc. And so it's kind of neat that depending on who you are and how you choose to play the game, you can end up with different characters at different times. And so each playthrough would be a little bit different. And it's really generous with how many characters you get to grab and try out, because each level gives you so many characters. So it would have been nice maybe to have a couple extra levels, but it's also kind of nice that the level count isn't so big that you're only unlocking one or two characters each place you go to. So it's not tedious at all, and again, that gives you quite a bit of replay value. The selection of characters is great. Like I said, it's enormous. There's a lot of really deep pulls. There are characters who I don't even know if they showed up in the 87 show or if they were just action figures, or if I just missed their episodes, but there are a couple of characters in this that I only know as action figures. There are also a couple characters, more than a couple, that I only know from Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters, and I'm not sure if they ever showed up in the show. There are characters that are in the Archie comics that may have had like one appearance in the show, or maybe didn't. There are characters that were only in the movies that didn't show up in the cartoon show. There are a couple characters like Karai, who I don't know if they showed up in anything this early, outside of the Mirage comics, which this game isn't doing a whole lot with, except for black and white skins to try to make these characters look a little bit more like they are in the comics. And it doesn't do that for everybody, but certain characters have different skins you can choose from, which is fun. And so the Turtles play as black and white, Casey Jones plays as black and white. I thought that was a really nice touch. And there are other characters that have different color schemes that you can choose between. So that's a lot of fun. There's a little bit of customization in this game, which I really appreciated. And again, gives it more replay value. So it's a lot of fun just to see what characters look like and you're only wasting 7 to 10 minutes each level to mess around with them and find that out. So you play through a whole level just to mess around with one character, and it's kind of worth it, which is really fun. The premise of the game is fun and hokey in all the right ways. The Shredder has kidnapped everyone, he says, and the Turtles are like, what do you mean by everyone? Like everyone in the city? And he's like, no, you idiots, just people you know, people you cared about. If you can, he says, if you can think of them, if you care about them, I have probably kidnapped them, which is really funny. And there's a little bit of talk about like hierarchy of importance of characters that the Turtles care about, which is a lot of fun. I kind of wish there was a little bit more dialogue in this game, which I don't think is a criticism I've ever thrown in a video game. I mean, I like that this being a throwback to, you know, a love letter to 90s video games. It doesn't feel the need to be insanely story heavy. This could have used a little bit more because the dialogue in this is pretty good and really funny and really true to that game, or to that show, I should say. We don't have new voice actors that have come in to do the characters. It's all done just like it would have been back then, where that's all in text, and then you have samples from the show for each character, and it doesn't bog it down with too many samples, but it's also not so redundant that it gets really annoying. But the sampling is really good in this. I kind of expected to either not hear anybody's voices or hear kind of not great you know, attempts at sounding like the original voices, you know, like just some other voice actors brought in. It doesn't do that. It takes dialogue, as far as I can tell, exactly from the show, and then tries to make it sound like it would be sampled in like a 16-bit sound chip or in an arcade sound chip, which is awesome. And it's all really authentic. I mean, this game could have come out back then, which is great, and it's just a really authentic experience. Like, if this game, and I should also say that I didn't run into anything at all really that was broken about this game, which I think you have to talk about when you're discussing homebrew games. Like, there's not necessarily the quality control that you would have with a licensed game, and I mean, I know that there have been lots of licensed games also with horrible quality control, but there's really nobody lording over people making a game like this to make sure that it's good, because nobody's making any money off of it. And this does not have that problem at all. It didn't crash on me. Nothing broke down anywhere. There weren't any places where the game was unplayable. The closest issue I had to that, well, it gets pretty polished. The closest issue I had to that was there's one level where there's a little bit of platforming where you're roof jumping. And I played as a character that had kind of a glide mechanic in lieu of a jump kick. And so I was able to easily jump off a building and then just glide to the next one. But my kids were playing as two other characters that did not have that. And they just kept falling down holes and dying constantly, so that was kind of a problem. And maybe there's some way to get over those holes that we missed, but as far as we could tell, those characters just could not make those jumps. That was the closest to a broken mechanic that we found, but otherwise, it's real smooth. If this was a licensed game, I would absolutely pay for it. Like a budget $20, $30 game, it would absolutely have been worth that. And I see this as kind of the Ninja Turtles version of something like Sonic Mania, where it's its own original thing, but it's also a throwback to everything that came before, and is really authentic about it, and understands that material, has a lot of reverence for that material, and has a wonderful attention to detail, but also brings some new things to it too. There are a couple mechanics that might have been in one of the beat-em-ups, and I just don't remember it, so forgive me if I'm giving this too much credit for inventing something that I just either don't remember or never played, because I haven't played all of those, or I haven't played all of those all the way through. But like Turtles in Time I played all the way through, and of course the original arcade game, the first NES game I was never able to get all the way through. It's just too hard. But like Hyperstone Heist, I never played more than the first couple levels of, because I just rented it and I didn't own it. Or if I did play all the way through it, I just don't remember now. Then there's what is Turtles 4 on NES, Manhattan something rather. I've never been all the way through that game, but I have it. I've played it some. But anyway, there's a cool growing mechanic in this that's really fun, where you get a thing of mutagen and then you get enormous. And there is another mechanic, I think this was in one of them somewhere, but I think, but I'm not sure, where you can get in vehicles. And I wish this utilized that more, because it's really fun. You'll have like a flying machine that a foot soldier is using, and then you beat up the foot soldier, and then you can get in his flying machine and fly around and shoot things. I wish this used that more. There's giant mousers that it does it with too. But yeah, I can't imagine this being any better if it was a licensed thing, and in a way I kind of wish it was official, and I'm also sort of glad that it's not, because I don't know if it would have gotten quite the treatment it has, although with Nickelodeon having the license for the last several years, there has been a lot of reverence for this material and a lot of stuff that they've done, and since they own everything, they're able to mix and match just like this does. So if this project had been a Nickelodeon thing, it might be more or less the same, and I'm a little bit surprised they didn't go to Nickelodeon and see if they would put their stamp of approval on this and sell it as a budget game. But I also really appreciate that it's free, and I don't know how many people would have actually paid for this, but I suspect it would have done okay, because there's a lot of still love for those beat-em-ups, and the original Ninja Turtles arcade machine is still considered one of the best beat-em-ups of all time, and Turtles has a great track record in this genre, so it was really fun to play a thing that looked at all of these at the same time. One of the things that's fun that it does, and again, I think it could have done this a little bit more, but it goes back to the original NES game again, not just with the overworld, but there's also a level that's taken right out of the first stage in that, where you play all the same enemies, and so like there's the fire guy that shoots like pieces of himself out, and there's those weird bat looking things you fight. That's one of the harder levels actually, but not anything like as hard as that game was. And so that was a lot of fun, and there's some homage to other 8-bit stuff, and even a kind of Atari level and early arcade machine stuff, and so it's got a lot of love also just for early video game history in general. One of the things that's kind of funny about this premise is that you're supposed to be rescuing a bunch of characters and then playing as them, but you also get to play as a lot of the villains, and so it's like you're rescuing people, I guess, that don't even want to be rescued. It's really nice that you get to play as a bunch of characters that you fought 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and they do all the same stuff that they did as bosses pretty much. So like Baxter Stockman, his special move is the same energy hand thing that he had in one of those games, and Slash does the turtle shell spin thing, which is not all that effective, but he does that like the boss did, and it's great. So it feels like you're kind of playing the game like stripped down and reconstructed, where it's like you get to play pieces of it that are like you're cheating. You know, you get to play as the bosses instead of as the turtles, and it's just a really fun feeling. It's really super nostalgic, but it's also just a really good game. The challenge is decent, although because there's a save feature, there's not really any chance that you're not going to get to see the whole game. And that's just how we make games these days. And that's good. I would hate for this to be so hard that you might have a chance at not getting to see all of it. At the same time, with different unlockable characters, I think it might have been fair if you had to play some of the same levels at least 2 or 3 times with different characters before you were able to get through them. I think that might have been fair, and might have made this a somewhat more authentic experience to what gaming was like back then, where there's a lot of trial and error, there's a lot of master a level before you can actually get through it. In this, you can lose all your lives, and you start with a generous number, but because there's that save feature, anytime you quit and come back in, if you've died all your lives, you're going to start with the initial allotment, so you're pretty safe. It's not going to be hard to get through this in a couple hours, even if you're not great at it. So again, like, some people might be a little bit irritated about that because it's too easy, but at least it's not like the port of the arcade game was on 360, where you just keep feeding quarters in. You have unlimited quarters because you're not actually at an arcade, and so there's no challenge at all. Like, you could kind of just stand there and occasionally beat a bad guy and still get through the game. You have infinite lives. This at least isn't like that, and I guess you could make it really hard on yourself and not use the save feature. and play it like an arcade game, and you'd be good. But and you know, you'd have that challenge. So I don't know. That's an option. I'll mention a couple other characters, but I don't want to give away everything. I love Mondo Gecko, and Mondo Gecko was a big selling point for me because Eric said he was in this game, and I was like, okay, I gotta play it. And so some of the Mutanimals are here, and I unlocked him the first or second level we played, so I was really excited. I got to play him through a lot of the game, but I also tried out a whole lot of other characters. Like I said, there are street-level civilians that you wouldn't expect to get to play as. You can play as characters like Vernon and Irma. I haven't done that yet, but they're in here, and it's hilarious. Like I said, Token Razor are here, which is great, but there are a whole bunch of villains, and I was excited about Metalhead. He's here. It's weird because you don't actually fight Metalhead. I thought that was odd. You fight Mecha Turtle, which I didn't remember there being a Mecha Turtle, and both of those characters are unlockable. So you fight Mecha Turtle to get Metalhead, but then you can play as either Mecha Turtle or Metalhead. I don't really know what that's about. I was a little disappointed not to fight Metalhead, because I'm pretty sure he was a boss in one of the games, but that's okay. At least I got to play as him, and that's great. And he's pretty great. Surprisingly, one of the most useful characters in the game is April. She fights with her microphone on a cord, and so she's got range. So she's got a good range weapon. I should mention, too, that, again, there's a lot of variation with weapons, and some characters just fight with their fists. Some characters have guns or laser pistols, and you don't actually hit things at all. You just shoot things down. And so April's got her microphone, and it's sort of like Michelangelo with nunchucks, but it's got more range, so she's more useful than Michelangelo. She runs pretty quick, and her special weapon is a camera flash that takes out everything on the screen. So she's awesome. I expected her to be one of the more worthless characters, and she is not that. So I recommend this game to anybody that loves Ninja Turtles, but especially this period of Ninja Turtles. You will recognize a lot of stuff if you played these games or if you watched that TV show. I should also mention it has a lot of love for that show. All of the level names are on top of a background that looks like the setup for each episode, so the title screens for the first season, and that's really cool. The character select screen is the back of the action figure boxes, just perfectly recreated, and that's really awesome. When you finish a level, it shows you the back of a box, and it shows you who you unlocked, and just like those boxes had, it's got the heroes part and the villains part, and it just looks just like it, and it's so super cool. I don't want to give away too many other Easter eggs and things. You really should just play this for yourself. It's free, so there's no risk at all. If you play this for 5 minutes and you don't enjoy it, you can just quit and never look at it again. I don't think that's likely to happen to you if you enjoy these kinds of games at all. Again, you might be a little bit let down by some of the level design. There's just not a whole lot going on with some of this, but like I said, the gameplay variation is pretty decent. The levels are just pretty short, and there are some elements in some of the levels that they're homaging back to that I kind of missed. Like, the first level of the original arcade game is here, but it doesn't have the bit with the bombs dropping down at a diagonal, and I was kind of surprised not to see that. So there's some things like that that I wished were here that weren't, but man, it's a great effort, especially for a free-to-play game online, and so yeah, I'm absolutely feeling it. What a fun experience, and I will definitely be going back through this just to try out all the characters that I haven't gotten a chance to try out yet. Thanks a lot for watching. Sure appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a comment. Let me know if you've played this game, if you liked it, or if you go check it out after this video, what you think of it. And in the meantime, Captain Logan, and I'll see you again next time.